So, I think we should kick this off, and it's time to introduce our first speaker. Some say that he once got into a fight with a bear and won, and the secret to his success is the size of his beard. Most of you will know him, it's Nicoll Hunt.
When Byron first asked me to come and do a keynote at IGC 15, I was confused. Mainly because I don't know what Byron has to do with the Irish Geometry Conference. It seemed like a weird thing for a mask. But anyway, a keynote's a keynote, so here we go. Two quick things. One, even though this talk has the word man in the title, all of the information is equally applicable to everyone, no matter which gender you identify as. Second thing, the simple trick that developers don't want you to know is this. If you're preparing your slides for a keynote talk at a prestigious conference, and you're not really sure what you're going to talk about or which useful set of bullet points or infographic to use, simply insert a GIF animation of Baby Sinclair from the hit 90s TV show Dinosaurs. It'll give your audience something to look at, and it means you can worry about what you're going to say the night before the actual talk. So I'm best known now for creating Fist of Awesome, the smash hit time-traveling lumberjack from last year. The Fist of Awesome was made almost entirely solo, apart from the soundtrack and a few additional bits of animation. All of the code, art, animation, design, writing, business shenanigans, PR, marketing, and sound effects were done by one person, me. And I'm far from the first and even further from the most successful person to do this. Games like Braid, Cave Story, Minecraft, Thomas Was Alone, Red Shirt, Another World, the original Prince of Persia, they were all made ostensibly by one person. Not the same person, that would be ridiculous. But yeah. Nowadays, I'm best known for being head of one-man studio I Fight Bears, owner of a prodigious beard, who likes to stand against bits of cut wood because it looks super cool. But 20 years ago, before I became the behemoth of a man I am now, I started my first one-man game studio, and it was in slightly less glamorous surroundings. It was in my bedroom, and before I could grow a beard, I could grow horrible, weird hair.
That's not you, is it?
It's technically me, yes.
Technically,
I think I'm a different person now, but it did come from that. And so I could sit awkwardly, I could play with my unfortunately placed red joystick, and I could make games on my Amiga 1200. Terrible, terrible games. This is Fat Alley 2. The plot of Fat Alley 2, this is getting scary. The plot of Fat Alley 2 revolves around Fat Alley, the titular character, trying to kill Sir Jimmy Savile. The reason for this, which I think is in a way very kind of forward-seeing, Sir Jimmy Savile was abducting children for his own nefarious needs. Now, people would listen to me, we could have saved a whole lot of awfulness. But no. Fat Alley 2 was probably the greatest achievement in my life to that point. It was, to all intents and purposes, a real game. It had graphics, it had sound effects. Technically, it was impossible to complete even the first level, but nonetheless, I was intensely proud of it. At the time, I put it on a very early version of the internet and then forgot all about it. Until 3 years ago, while Googling my own name, I found this. It's a review of Fat Alley 2 in a German Amiga magazine. What? I was absolutely blown away. Someone had found my game. Someone had downloaded my game. Someone had thought my game worthy enough to write a review of it in German and print it in a magazine. Fantastic. Unfortunately, I don't speak German, but fortunately, my flatmate at the time, Manuel, did. Manuel, I need you. What is it? He had a really weird accent. This is a game I made when I was 14, and someone's reviewed it. And can you translate this for me? I need to know what it says. Oh, of course I can translate it. That's amazing. Let me have a look. I don't think I should translate it. But I insisted. And this is what it said. The game Fat Alley 2 It's probably the worst Amiga game that Daylight has touched. That's a great start, I would admit. If there were review scores for games on these pages, Fat Alley 2 would deserve a score of 1%. If only for the unintentional comedy. But very quickly, the player is overwhelmed with a sense of nausea and horror at the programming skills of Nicoll Hunt. Harsh. So fortunately, when I was 14 years old and someone was berating my game, I was blissfully unaware of this, because if I was aware of it, I probably wouldn't have decided to go to university and learn how to program properly and go away and get a job in the games industry. And that's what I did. I went to university, I got a job in the games industry, and I started work at Codemasters. And the very first game I worked on was Colin McRae Rally 3. And Colin McRae Rally 3 is, still, to date, the best-selling game I've ever worked on. Everything from Colin McRae Rally 3 onwards has been a horrible spiral of unsuccessful games. It's slightly sad, but there you go. Nearing the end of my downward spiral in the AAA games industry, I found myself in Scotland, working for Real-Time Worlds on a game called APB. You may not be aware of APB. If you are, you may be aware of the fact it cost about $100 million and is probably the single most unsuccessful game ever developed.
It was awesome.
Yeah, it had good points. The character customization was awesome.
Oh my god, yeah.
Someone doing the talk just now had something to do with that. But yeah, and so I found myself in APB, $100 million. But saying that, $35,000 of that was spent customizing this sweet truck. Characters from the game on the side of the truck, and like a really cool interior and stuff. So people who say that we just frittered away all these millions of pounds on like unnecessary vanity projects, but they're just jealous. When I was at Real-Time Worlds, I'd gone from working on teams of about 20 at Codemasters to teams of 250 on APB. And I found myself increasingly pigeonholed as just a programmer. Far too often in my career hear statements like, Nicoll, no, we can't put slightly camped deer in the game. This is a rally driving simulator. That makes no sense at all. It's obviously very frustrating when you're as deeply creative as I am. And so, when Real-Time Worlds inevitably collapsed into a steaming pile of fire, brimstone and redundancies, I decided to move on with my life and go to London. And I left the games industry behind. I'd been made redundant twice at that point. I'd been involved in multiple games that weren't released, and horrible experiences. And so I decided, like, let's just not do games, let's do something else. And so I started working for a company called Filmlight, who make color grading software. And the software they use is, they create is used on all kinds of movies and TVs. It's used like on the Harry Potter series and Spider-Man and James Bond movies and TV shows like Orange is the New Black and House of Cards and Coronation Street. So top quality stuff. And so that was my life. I wasn't making games anymore. I was going to my 9-to-5 job that paid incredibly well in a really cool location in the middle of London with incredibly lovely, intelligent, hyper-intelligent people. And every day I'd go home and I'd miss making games, like some kind of weird Stockholm Syndrome situation. And so when I moved down to London, I sold all of my Xbox games because I was, no more games, this is it, I'm done, I'm totally done. And I used that money I made from my Xbox games to buy a first generation iPod Touch. And so I started making games for this iPod Touch, just little games in my spare time, just for fun. And the more shitty little games I made, the more I realised that I loved making games, like it's the best thing. And if I make an entire game by myself, then there's so many benefits. I get to push myself in new directions, learn new skills, and most importantly, I get to keep all of the money and all of the glory to myself. Around the same time I did that, I saw a talk by Cliffsky of Positech Games. And Cliffsky has been a one-man band for over a decade, very, very successful. And he gave a little bit of insight into his work ethic. And his work ethic was to invest in yourself. And what that meant was to literally spend money you need to make yourself have the best work environment, get the best chair, get the best desk, the best computer, the best software, everything to improve your efficiency and comfortableness in your work environment, because the more comfortable you are, the more efficient you'll be and the better work you'll create. And also, it will push you to create bigger successes because you need to pay for all this shit you just bought. And so that's what I did. I bought my stupidly expensive chair, my relatively expensive desk, and a beat of MacBook, and I was like, now this is I can take over the world.
And an hourglass to keep track.
Exactly, exactly. And so I realised I need three things to achieve world domination. I need beer, I need chicks, I need cigarettes. Wait a second, no, that's me just reading the slide, that's completely wrong. I'd actually need time, money, and skills. I'm going to come back to the time and money thing, but let's talk about skills for a second. The thing about being a one-man band is because you've got no one else to fall back on, you need to get better at everything you suck at, because you're the only person that can do everything. There's a theory that to be an expert at anything would take about 10,000 hours. And that's 4 years, 9 to 5 doing something to become an expert at it. Which, if you want to be an expert at everything, that will take a long time. But to be competent at something, that won't take anywhere near 10,000 hours. I'm personally a big fan of things that aren't perfect. Things where somehow the flaws add to the whole. Games like Nicoll, or TV shows like South Park, or Arnold Schwarzenegger's acting career. This is a screenshot from a very early build of Fist of Awesome. And this is a screenshot from the released version of Fist of Awesome. As you can see, I'm still nowhere near 10,000 hours, but I'm consistent in my awfulness. And so it gives you the impression that it's a choice rather than horribly limited ability. I chose pixel art for 3 reasons. 1, I really like pixel art. 2, the inherent limitations of pixel art simplify the creation of art. And 3, using pixel art means I can cover up my utter inability to draw hands. I also find that using pixel art gives more character and sprites. Your brain fills in the gaps in between where the pixels should be. It's a technique that goes all the way back to the 19th century and the Impressionist art movement. Although I somehow doubt Monet would be particularly impressed in using his revolutionary art skills to justify me drawing the subtle outline of a naked bear's arse. Limitations need not be graphical based or even like talent based. I gave myself a limitation when I was making Fist of Awesome of not using virtual controls. Every single beat 'em up I played on a touchscreen to that point used virtual controls. There'd be an A button you pressed, there'd be a B button you pressed. And I found that I was looking at my thumbs more than I was looking at the actual gameplay. And it was very distracting, and playing games like Final Fight and Streets of Rage, they weren't the same games I played because of this. And so I gave myself that limitation, and then I developed a new system which involved gesture-based systems. So you'd swipe up to jump, you'd swipe down to stomp, you'd tap to punch, hold to do a strong punch. And that, based on like a limitation I gave myself, ended up being one of the things that was called out in reviews for particular praise, and it was actually the reason I got invited to Eurogamer and got to show the game off to tens of thousands of people, which is pretty awesome. A producer I worked with in Scotland, on one of the many failed projects I worked on, said, we need to work smarter, not harder. And I think that's a very valid notion, and it makes a lot of sense. Granted, on the project he was referring to, we ended up working incredible overtime, unpaid, obviously, and had the most convoluted build system I'd ever seen. So it's easier said than done. Nowadays, though, we have so much more than I had when I was 14 years old. We have all these free tools like Unity and Unreal Engine 3, and now Source 2 is free as well. Stuff that's incredibly advanced and makes making games like so much easier. Some people complain that it's too easy for people to make games now, and there's too many people making games. There's too many games, and I think those people are horribly wrong and misguided. As far as I see it, and to paraphrase Louis C.K., if someone with no experience and no training can make a game as good as you, maybe you're shit. I want to see games that can only be created by you. When I made Fist of Awesome, my theory behind it was anyone can technically do what I'm doing, but no one else would put a lumberjack and bears and slightly camped deer in the game. And that's what I like, games which they're not driven by technology, they're driven by creativity. You're birthing something into the world that only you could create. That's what gets me excited about games. Time. I got bored making the slides, so I just started using stock pictures for everything. I apologise. As a one-man band, time is of the utmost importance. Because you're doing everything yourself, you will always be the bottleneck for a project. So you need all of the hours you can get to create and iterate upon your work. I was very lucky in that my day job at Filmlight, they let me cut my hours at work, so I only worked 4 days a week. And that gave me Mondays, Saturdays and Sundays full time to work on my work on Fist of Awesome. That's quite lucky. Most people don't get to do stuff like that. So other things you can do is limit your time on Twitter and the internet. I don't know if you've ever become aware of this. I only realised this the other day. The default avatar on Twitter is an egg. Do you know what else is shaped like an egg? Tamagotchi. Tamagotchis force you to feed them, otherwise they will wither and die. But they're not real. If you don't feed the internet, it won't wither and die. Don't feed the Tamagotchi. The Tamagotchi is a lie. Lost stock foes. So obviously, money is, unless you're independently wealthy, money and time are like heavily intertwined when you're running your one-man band. There are many ways you could fund your one-man band. You could have personal savings. You could have a day job. You could run a Kickstarter. You could have a wealthy relative or very understanding spouse. You could win the lottery. You could sell your body to medical science. There's many options. I personally chose to do a Kickstarter. I did the Fist of Awesome Kickstarter. There was two reasons. One, I would like just a little bit of money so I could fund a sabbatical of 2 months for developing the game, and also so I could buy like a new fancy computer to replace the beat-up MacBook I was using. When I made the Fist of Awesome Kickstarter, I did a lot of research, and what I found was pretty much every single failed Kickstarter involved someone speaking to a webcam and have nothing to show for the game. Just, this is what the game will be, let me tell you what the game will be. And so I decided to do the opposite of that. I wanted to show people what the game would be. And so the video pitch for Fist of Awesome Kickstarter was me, like a horrible pixel version of me, walking through a mock-up of what the game would look like, saying, this is Tim Burr, he's a lumberjack, this is some bears, you probably want to punch them in the face. And that had an incredible reaction, because no one had seen stuff like that before, which is funny because I completely ripped off the idea from Media Molecule, who all their GDC talks they put inside the game and walk around, so I just ripped them off wholesale. But it ended up being really good, and the Kickstarter people got in touch with me and they made the project of the day and then the project of the month at one point. And I met one of the founders, and he said that when they're going around, like, telling people what Kickstarter is, they used Fist of Awesome's Kickstarter video as an example of a really good pitch, which was very, very nice of them. One thing, if you do decide to run a Kickstarter and you decide to make some physical things, I hugely, hugely urge you to make them obscenely expensive. Because creating physical rewards for a Kickstarter is incredibly time-consuming. For example, in the Kickstarter for Fist of Awesome, a poster was £50, a fridge magnet was £30, and a t-shirt was £100. And even then, I was still really annoyed having to wrap up all of the bloody posters and put them in tubes and envelope them and find the places that could send and create good quality t-shirts. I just had a conversation outside about how hard it is to find places that do good quality t-shirts. Until you've lived through the pain, you have no idea what it's like. Yeah, obscenely expensive, because you're trying to fund the development of a computer game. If you create stuff and sell it at cost, then you're not doing that. You're basically being a shop. So yeah, so it was a huge success. This is how happy it made me. And yeah, so when the Fist of Awesome Kickstarter finished, I'd raised over 200% of my original goal, which was, to be fair, only £5,000, but it still meant a lot to me at the time. But the thing that actually was most important at the end of it was this 951 backers. Because what it gave me was an audience. And it gave me so much experience talking to people and trying to get my point of view across about how, what the game was, and trying to succinctly describe it to people. And I believe that process is called marketing. A lot of people ask me, Nicoll, how do you keep your beard so luxuriously soft and impressive? And I answer them the same way. Well, it's beard conditioner and drinking lots of dark ale. The same people often ask me, Nicoll, how do I do publicity for my indie game? Should I be hiring a PR company? Should I be buying advertising? And the way I see it, doing like PR for an indie game is a lot like writing a profile for a dating website. You want to give people a reason to be interested in you. You want to tell stories. This is the story behind Fist of Awesome. On the 13th of February 2012, I forgot to get my girlfriend a Valentine's Day present. And so, like any rational human being would, I locked myself in the office/spare room and I made a game. I made a game which featured a heavily pixelated version of me punching bears in the face, until at the very end of it I'd reach my girlfriend, give her a kiss and say, "Happy Valentine's Day, hope you like your present." And when she didn't leave me on the spot, I knew at that point that there was a market for a game about a heavily pixelated man with a beard punching bears in the face. And that's the story I've told ever since I've been talking about Fist of Awesome. And it's a story, people remember it, people still come up to me now and talk about it. As a little addendum to that story actually, I had to do a little bit of recording for the game, for a documentary, and I discovered that the early prototype for Fist of Awesome had taken on a life of its own, and instead it's now a boob-grabbing simulator. I swear it didn't do that when I gave it to my girlfriend. If you don't have a story, make one up. Commandeering holidays is something I take great pride in, so instead of Christmas I celebrate Fistmas. When I released Fist of Awesome on Steam on the 4th of July, on Independence Day, incidentally, never release a game on the 4th of July, it's a terrible idea, no one is playing computer games. Instead of celebrating Independence Day, we'd celebrate Indie Bear Dance Day. And so I'd send emails to the press, like ask them if they prefer the Grizzly two-step or the Polar Polka. Yeah, good fun. More than anything, don't do the bare minimum. Get out and about and talk about your game. This is like the next few slides are just pictures of my face, and I apologise in advance. Don't do the bare minimum. Get out, get real people playing your game and watch them play it. Make new friends, and most importantly, get used to describing your game in as few words as possible. I'm not a natural extrovert. Being around people and interacting with them exhausts me. But talking about my games excites me. And I think if talking about your game doesn't excite you, then maybe you're making the wrong game. Trust me, after 4 days at an expo, you will be legendary at talking about your game in as few words as possible, because you just want it all to stop, and so you can go home to bed, cry yourself to sleep. This is really just to break up all the pictures of my face, because there's far, far too many of them. When I was working in the AAA games industry, no one asked me to come and do talks. The work I was doing then was in many ways more technical and more cutting edge than what I do now, which any Muppet could do. But I didn't have many stories to tell. Now, I'll speak anywhere anyone asks me. Thanks Byron. That was another one where we did it. Okay, look on. And the thing is that I'm not any more qualified now to talk about anything. I don't particularly know anything more, but I've got better stories. And stories will always spread further and faster than a press release ever will.
As well as your beard.
It just spreads randomly in all directions. Like the more talks I do, the more people I get to meet, and the more people I get to meet, the more opportunities come my way. It's all linked. The better talking I get, the better I am at writing, and the better I'm at writing, the better games I make, and the better games I make, the better, the more I have to talk about. It's all kind of linked together. When you're a one-man band, you have to let all of your skills kind of blend together and spill over. You need to, what else you need to do? Lots of different things. But most importantly, you need to just follow your intuition. So many things have happened since I started being a one-man band and doing all these different random things I could have never predicted would have happened. And I could have never predicted someone would make papercraft models of characters I designed. I could have never predicted random people would stop and ask for a picture with me. I could have never predicted someone would make a documentary about my beard. And I could have never predicted that because of something I'd done, someone else would have to wear a bear suit and grind up against a stripper pole in a fan movie. All that stuff is brilliant and fun. But there's also a very good business reason to be a one-man band. I see a lot of, especially students straight out of university, and they're making their first commercial game, and there's teams of 6, 8, 10, 12 people all work on this one first commercial game. And as much as I hate to say it, those games are almost certainly going to fail. They might not fail creatively, they might be good games, but they won't succeed financially. You've got to sell so many copies of a game to make a return on investment and actually afford to feed yourself. This is how much revenue to date Fist of Awesome has made. At least it was yesterday. So just over £76,000, which for me personally is an incredible success. It's let me put the deposit on the house. It's in many ways completely changed my life. But if I'd been part of even a 4-man team, it would have been a disaster. No one would have made over minimum wage. This graph also shows the importance in targeting different platforms. If I just focus all of my attention on Ouya, for example, who were big supporters of me at the start, again, would have not been in a particularly good situation. So you have to make a lot of compromises to be a one-man band, especially I do. And not everyone is understanding of that. In fact, some people are just downright angry about that. This is an example of some of the quotes I get from, especially YouTube people. They seem to be the nicest. You're not clever, Nicoll Hunt. Looks like a steaming pile of dog shit. I hope you die in a car wreck. This is probably my favourite one. There's a big, huge rant, and then just the end it just says, "This is a perfect example of everything that is wrong with indie games." I think my favourite thing about that is just I've nailed it. Like, every single conceivable thing I could do wrong, I did it wrong. I wish I had a physical version of a box of Fist of Us, and just so I could put that as a quote on the back. Nailed it. I think we can all be agreed that the greatest movie of all time is Rocky. And I think we can all agree that the greatest quote from the greatest movie of all time is, "It's not how hard you can hit, it's how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward." You know how I said at the very, very start of this talk that the most important thing to be a success in a one-man band is to put in gifs of Baby Sinclair from the hit 90s TV show Dinosaur? That was a lie. The real secret is to not give a fuck. You might not know this, but the very first Foo Fighters album was a solo album. Dave Grohl wrote all of the songs in the album. He played all the instruments on the album. Dave Grohl didn't ask anyone's permission to make that album. He did it because he wanted to make something away from the expectations of other people. And now it's the biggest rock band in the last few decades. Fuck anyone who says you can't make a game by yourself. Fuck anyone who says that games need to adhere to their notion of what makes them good. Fuck anyone who says you need professional marketing or no one will buy your game. Fuck anyone who belittles your hard work. Fuck anyone who says you can't achieve your dreams. Fuck all of them. Do it all yourself. Show the world what you can achieve and be a one-man band. I think it's time for questions as well. If anyone has any questions about that.
We have half an hour questions.
Wow, half an hour questions. Very
Pretty hard ones,
specifically.
yeah?
What happened to the truck?
I have no idea. The weird thing is, we spent 35 grand doing up that truck. This was about 2 years before the game actually shipped. No one even knew what the game was. And so I think it got taken to truck competitions and things. I think it won a few awards. But the only people that have seen it were people who go to truck shows. I'm not really sure what the intention of it was. I don't know where it is. Hopefully it's still driving around, inspiring people to play our game.
Yeah, I have a question about your game, which I suppose is on the Kickstarter page, and I apologize, but how long did it take you to make it by yourself and fuck the world and everything?
Thank you. It took around about 18 months from beginning to first release on mobile platforms. A lot of that was spent kind of in my spare time, so I did work 4 days a week, and then the weekends and Mondays were my indie dev day. And then I had 2 months in the middle of that the Kickstarter paid for as a sabbatical. After the game was released, it was quite successful, so I got to cut my hours at work, and I spent another 6 months making a Steam version for PC and Mac. So that was so it was about 2 years by the time I was finished porting it to everything. I still do bits and pieces occasionally on it, but it was like 18 months for the main development.
You mentioned that you support yourself with a full-time job.
Yeah.
Head down the hours to get more hours. Is that what you're doing now? And working on more games?
I've kind of changed a little bit. After Fist of Awesome came out, I decided that that's without doubt what I want to do with my life. I don't really want to have it as a hobby thing. I want that to be the main purpose of my life is to make games, basically. And so I cut my hours even more, so I'm only a contractor now with Filmlight, so I still do work there usually about 2 days a week, and that plus Fist of Awesome revenue and stuff kind of makes me able to support myself. Right now I'm looking for investment for my next game, which is going to be outrageously ambitious, and I'm hoping to get enough investment that I won't have to go to work for 2 years, and I can spend that developing the next, hopefully, smash hit game. But for the last year or so, I've been supporting myself mainly through Fist of Awesome and through freelance work.
So yeah, when you were talking about marketing, one of the things that you mentioned is travelling all over the place. It's a strange microphone. Travelling all over the place and meeting lots of people face to face and making all these connections. So does this mean we've reached a point now with independent development where if you can't travel, you can't market?
I don't think that's true. I think you can make it any way work. I'm pretty sure Notch didn't do that much travelling with Minecraft in the early days, but it still ended up exploding. If you have a good game and you manage to tell some people about it, you've always got a good chance of doing well. For me, because I make terrible games, I need to get out there and speak to people and just kind of hypnotise them into believing in me. I find, personally, I find it very beneficial. It's useful because, I live in London now, and so lots of events happen in London, and it made it quite easy for me to go to different places and meet new people and interact like that. But I don't think you need to get out there and do it. It helps a lot, and especially if you're working by yourself, getting out there and speaking to people and seeing other people play your game is so valuable. But it's not necessary, but it helps a lot.
Also, Cliff Harris would say you can advertise. Not a lot of indies advertise, but you can advertise your game.
You can
and
advertise.
you can actually have success by staying in your house just advertising. But it's nice to go out to these things and meet everyone. You had
Right, so you mentioned time is one of the key factors.
Yes.
What are your best tips for managing your time today? Because obviously as an indie, working at your desk, breaking up your time, working through what you do, what kind of strategies do you use to maximise the performance in your day?
Thank you for reminding me a little bit of my talk that I forgot to say. But on one of the early slides, there's a picture of my desk, and I had an hourglass on it. And the hourglass isn't just there for decorative reasons. I'm terrible at procrastinating and following links to the internet and then coming out of it 4 hours later just bewildered saying what the heck just happened. And so if I find myself using the internet too much, I'll turn over the hourglass, and when the sands are dropping, I'm not allowed to play with the internet. And it's a little psychological thing, but it makes a big difference. And I find myself not even really needing the hourglass anymore because I become aware very quickly as, oh, hang on, I'm on the internet, I don't need to be on the internet right now. And it's a way of kind of training your brain. Like I say, you don't need to be on Twitter all the time. It's very useful for communicating with people, trying to promote your game and ideas and stuff like that, but you don't need to be on it all the time. I try to limit my Twitter interactions now. I used to be on it a lot more than I am now, but I still got quite a few followers, so it's fine.
Can I just tweet that?
Yes.
It's a case in that. I mean, do you have any particular strategy for how you break what time and tasks you're going to actually do?
Yeah, I try to, I work best when I've got a big list of things to go through, so I try and roughly plan in advance what I want to achieve, and then just go through the kind of to-do list. I find if I have a blank sheet in front of me, I just achieve nothing. I think it's best that I try not to plan too much in advance, because obviously especially if you create a game, the game you create at the end is nothing like the game you had in mind at the very start. But just try and give yourself bullet points so you have some focus when you're going through it.
Hey, so my question is, you said you had those 2 months. How important were those months? did you have breakthroughs every day, or were there like weeks where you just stuck on something and on a lull and you couldn't break through and had to find motivation somehow?
Yeah, I definitely found, because like before that point, I'd never worked full time on a game by myself, and holy crap, that is hard. I'm a lot better at it now, but I found at the very start when just every single day I'd get up, I'd go to the room next door, I'd sit down, I'd start working. It's very hard. Sometimes it's very hard to motivate yourself, and eventually, and this is something I hate doing, but I do it anyway. I go for runs in the morning. Running is awful. I hate it, but I found that going for a run first thing in the morning, it got my mind active. It gave me a chance to think about what I wanted to achieve during the day. I mean, when I actually sat down, one, I was so glad I wasn't running anymore, and two, I always felt a lot more focused than I was if I just went straight from bed to sitting down and trying to work. So that'd be my advice, just do something first thing in the morning that isn't sitting down and trying to work.
Take regular breaks.
Yeah, regular breaks.
The monetization model for Fist of Awesome, which I love by the way, really
Thank
good,
you.
was a premium upfront payment. But we've seen online smartphone stores moving probably more heavily towards the free-to-play model over the last couple of years. Probably even in the last year, it's accelerated massively. Are you aware of that with your upcoming project, or are you still convinced you can turn a decent profit from an upfront payment?
From a personal point of view, I still prefer upfront payment. The games I like to make, I think work better when they're not being constrained by having to fit into a free-to-play model. I'm lucky in that I only have to pay me. If I had an entire team of people, then the maximum revenue you can get for a game is a lot more important. But if I'm doing freelance work, for example, I'll recommend people probably do free-to-play because you're probably going to make more money that way. My next game, it probably won't be on mobile to begin with. I'm aiming to like release it on Xbox One, PlayStation 4, PC, Mac and stuff. And then if mobile platforms are powerful enough, then I'll port it to it later on. But I'm just personally a big fan of like games from my childhood, games where someone created something, you give them money, you play the game, and that's it. I don't really like the piecemeal approach you get with free-to-play gaming, where the fun is kind of limited until you pay money. It's not how I particularly enjoy playing or developing games.
Anyone else?
Right, thank you.
Thank you.